During the entrance in this Mass, the entrance ceremonies of this Mass, you immediately notice that the priest and the deacon wears pink. And it is rare in the church that we see priests wearing pink. And if you remember, during the Advent season, you remember that on the third Sunday of Advent, the priest also used pink. Now, the color pink is a sign of joy. It brings us to the meaning and the joyful celebration. During the Advent season, it indicates the joy that we will be welcoming Jesus on His nativity, on His birth. So in the midst of waiting, in the season of Advent, we are reminded that the waiting will not end in nothing, but will end in a joyful welcoming of the coming of our Lord, His birth. On the same way that in this, in the middle of Lenten season, we are contemplating the suffering, the journey of Jesus towards Jerusalem. We anticipate the birth of Jesus into new life, Easter. That is why we are reminded that everything will not end in death, in suffering, but rather in the joyful celebration of Easter. That is why today we wear pink. We use pink to remind us all of the joy that we will be welcoming Jesus once again. Everything will not end in death and in His journey in Jerusalem, but towards Easter, the celebration of His coming into new life and His overcoming of darkness and bringing us all towards the light. And so in this fourth Sunday of Advent, we meditate on reconciliation. According to the dictionary, Webster actually, which I had consulted last night, the first meaning of reconcile is to make friendly again. And so if one become reconciled to you, this means that I change my attitude towards you. I once again give you my friendship. And in like manner, if you become reconciled to me, you change your attitude towards me. You once again give me your friendship. Now, because in almost quarrel or war, both persons involved have withdrawn their friendship at the moment of their quarrel, a reconciliation usually means that both parties modify their attitude to undergo a change of heart. So there are two of you who quarreled. It is but expected that both of you will be reconciled. Both parties are reconciled because both have to pass from enmity, being enemy, towards friendship. And as a consequence of this common experience of our reconciliation as a mutual transformation, we spontaneously think that the same thing applies when we reconcile to God, namely in the sacrament of confession, which we now call the sacrament of reconciliation. When the penitent go to the priest and ask to be reconciled. So most people go to confession with that idea, that the aim of the sacrament or going to the sacrament of confession or reconciliation is to change God's attitude towards them, to make God friendly again. Unfortunately, my dear brothers and sisters, it is all wrong and contradicts today's second reading and even the gospel. So let us look at these readings. If you have just listened carefully, on the second reading, in what Paul wrote to the Corinthians, as in the rest of the New Testament, it is never, not even once, stated that God is reconciled to us. On the contrary, Paul always says that we are the ones in need of reconciliation, and that God is the one doing the reconciliation to us. So God does not need to be reconciled. Never as it were, turn his back on us. He never turned his back on us. It is rather we who, when we commit sin, we turn our back to God. Reconciliation, therefore, will consist in introducing a change in us, not in God. It consists of converting, that is, turning towards our hearts to God. So therefore, we can understand Paul's pressing exhortation when he said, "Let yourselves be reconciled to God." And in the same idea, it is powerfully expressed in the parable of the prodigal son, which is very familiar with us. We have just heard it. So after the foolish prodigal had squandered all his inheritance, why did he decide to return home? Because he was sorry for his behavior? Well, not at all. It was because he was hungry and knew that his father's employers will feed him, so he hoped to be hired as one of them. In his entire reasoning, he never considered how grievously he had pained his father. The thought never crossed his mind and that his father could perhaps be hoping for his return. Not once does the story suggest that he had changed of heart, but the father had. In fact, his father had been waiting for him anxiously, watching the highway in which he knew his son would have to travel, and then scrutinizing the horizon in search of the familiar silhouette. Can you imagine after the son collected his inheritance, the father knew that someday, somehow, the son of him will return. We can imagine him, maybe in the afternoon towards evening, he would go out of the house, he would look up the horizon because he knew that someday his son will return. Which explains how it happened, as the story specifies, that he was able to catch sight of the son while he was still a long way off. Did the father, when this happened, wait for his son to reach him? No. He ran to his son. So he saw the son far off. He never waited for the son to come. The father was the one who ran towards the son, forgetting his age and the oriented rules of deportment for a rich personage like him. He ran out to welcome back, to embrace, to kiss his son. Did he scold him then or wait for at least gesture of apology? No. He threw his arms around his son's neck and kissed him again, again, and again. And when the son began his prepared job hunting, little speech, he interrupted him and ordered the servant to reinstate him in his former position as beloved son. The father was not interested in his son's motives for returning. His forgiveness had nothing legal about it. It was pure affection. He did not need to be reconciled to his son, for he had never stopped loving his son with a perfect love. Only the son needed to be reconciled to his father. So, brothers and sisters, this is the story of reconciliation. And all of us, maybe, is this son, the prodigal son. And we need to be reconciled to our God. And this is the moment during this Lenten season we are given this opportunity to go back to Him. Because God Himself is waiting for us. We are long far off. Maybe we are just walking towards Him. But when we decided, after examination of conscience, that we are in need of reconciliation, then our Father in heaven will run towards us to embrace us, to give us this reconciliation, this forgiveness that we needed. We cannot say that we do not need forgiveness because we have not offended anyone. At least we have not killed yet anybody, or we have not offended immensely somebody. But if you look deeply in our relationship with God, there are some points which are in need to be reconciled. And when we look at our relationship with one another, towards your parents, friends, co-workers, your employees, your employers, or person near you, somehow we have offended them. And when we offended our neighbor, our brothers and sisters, our family members, we have offended and we have distorted the image of God present in us. So let us all together anticipate the joy that we will be having this Easter. And we can only feel that wholeheartedly in our hearts if we have also this joy of being reconciled with God. The celebration of Easter will be complete if all of us have this joy that is present in our hearts. So there is one more Sunday that remain in order for us to enter into the Holy Week. And let us take that opportunity to be reconciled with God and to our neighbor. And during this reconciliation, it is God Himself that will welcome us, because all of us is in need of reconciliation. The Father is calling us, looking for us, and in His welcoming arms, He wanted all of us to go back to Him.